Wednesday night, October 27th, 2021. We're going to begin on something new, which is Beresheet. We've discussed halachot of the Beresheet. Beresheet is Rabbi Yosef from Baghdad, and he's most famous for his book Beresheet, but he's written many different books. And Beresheet is a compendium of halachot that he basically taught over the course of 2 years in the great synagogue of Baghdad to approximately 1,000 people every Shabbat. And these halachot really created a name for himself and for his style of halakha. And from there, went on to Yerushalayim and to many Sephardic communities throughout the world. For a significant period of time, I'd say at least 60 years, the halachot of the Beresheet were studied very, very carefully and adhered to, almost, as if they were God-given by almost every Sephardic community in the world. And not until Hakham Obadia Yosef came along and started challenging the rulings of the Beresheet, then we start seeing a difference in the way halakha is practiced. First in Yerushalayim, and then again from Yerushalayim to other locales. What's interesting about the Beresheet himself tells us in many places that he follows Maran, he follows Yosef Karo. At the same time, we see that he deviates. He likes to be mahmir. In many cases, he'll go with Muram, Rabbi Moshe Esolish, as opposed to Rabbi Yosef Karo. And if there is a alternate ruling by the Ari or the Rashash, Bishalom Shar'abi, he'll go with the Ari and the Rashash and the ruling of the Kabbalah as opposed to simple halakha as per Shulchan Aruch or Murah. So of course, this changed the way Judaism was practiced. It had a profound effect on everything, from basic things like putting on a talit to making a Berakhah, to having Kavanah, to when not you say Shem Hashem, or rather in a Berakhah, you would say Berakhah without Shem Malchut, or you would otherwise. So many things. And hopefully over the course of, I'm thinking in the next 2 to 3 years at least, possibly longer, if we're able to adhere to this, we'll be able to go through Beresheet, see the halachot, the way he laid them down, see how Hakham Obadia Yosef said otherwise, look at sources in Shulchan Aruch, at Kaf Haim Sofer, Kaf Haim Palachi, Hesed Alafim, Zechol Abraham, many other famous Sephardic works of halakha, and then also how we actually practice the halachot and or minhagim. Do we adhere to what the Beresheet says, or to what Hakham Obadia Yosef says, or maybe something completely different? But I think everybody stands to learn from it. Myself, for one, and I think everybody here will all be able to feed off of each other and teach each other a thing or two. Now, the Beresheet is set up that he opens up the parasha with a derasha of sorts based upon a pasuk in the parasha, and from there he basically opens up into the grouping of halachot that he wants to discuss. Okay, so for example, over here in Parashat Beresheet, he opens up with his petiha. Vayas Adonai Elohim la'adam u'ishto kotnot or v'yalbishem. Okay, Borei Olam made for Adam and Havva clothing, of leather, and he dressed them. Now from there he takes clothing and being dressed, and from there he gives a whole derasha. Generally, his derashot are based upon Kabbalistic ideas. And he comes back, he lands, and he connects it to a topic. Over here, he's connecting it to our cloak that we wear, and that is our talit. So I don't think there's any real reason for us to go through the derashot that open up each parasha. I'd like to focus strictly on the halachot themselves, unless, of course, everybody involved thinks that we need to go and read the derashot and understand them. There are a lot of Kabbalistic concepts, and I think that we'll end up breaking our heads on them, and they're very difficult for us to conceptualize and to really connect with. So I don't think it's wise for us to do it. But again, if everybody really wants to, then we'll do it. Otherwise, I'm going to start this parasha strictly with the halachot. And please, I want you to chime in, okay, as opposed to usual classes where we read Teshuvah and we don't know what's coming next. We have short halachot over here. So we can each chime in, ask questions, try to understand what's happening, what's not happening. Okay. So Ben Ish Chai, Shana Rishona, Parashat Beresheet. הלכה א', קודם שיברך ויתעטף, יכוון לקיים מצוות עשה ללבוש סיסית מסויסת כהלכתו, שנאמר ועשו להם סיסית על כנפי בגדיהם, והיא מצוות עשה שהזמן גרמה, ועל ידי כוונת הכנה זו, אז יהיה כוח בהכנתו בברכה להעלות מיין נוקבין ולהמשיך המוחין, כמו שכתב רבנו הרשש בנהר שלום. ולכן, טוב לומר בפיו קודם הברכה לשמיחו קודשה בריך ושלטה, הריני מוכן ללבוש סיסית מסויסת כהלכה, כמו שציוונו אדוני אלוהינו, ועשו להם סיסית על כנפי בגדיהם, כדי לעשות נחל רוח ליוסנו וכולי. So he opens up and he says, before you make the Berakhah and you wrap yourself in the talit, you have to have Kavanah. And what is your Kavanah? And this goes to any time you're putting on talit with Berakhah, okay, weekdays, Shabbat, holidays, it makes no difference. Kavanah has to be that we're here to fulfill the mitzvah of wearing Sissit Misuyeset Ke'elchato. Okay, you're wearing the four-cornered garment and you have adhered these Sissit strings to it according to Halakha. Like the Pasuk says, Pasuk in B'midbar, Tetvav v'lamidhet, ve'asu lahem Sissit akanfim b'chdehem. Make for yourself Sissit on the corners of your garments. And this is a mitzvah, Asish HaZeman Gerama. It's a time-dependent, positive mitzvah. And through this Kavanah, okay, and now he goes into a Kabbalistic idea, okay, and through this Kavanah, you will have the strength in your preparation to raise the Mayin Nukbin and to continue the Muhin. So this Mayin Nukbin and the Muhin has to do with basically elevating things from the bottom up and to pull certain types of intellectual thoughts that come with it. Again, concepts that I'd really rather not get into them because I have a difficult time understanding them, so even more difficult time explaining them, and I don't think many of us will gain from dwelling on these Kabbalistic points. Okay, but we do have to understand, to the Ben Yosef Hayim, to the Ben Ish Chai, such concepts are extremely important, very, very important. Okay, and he's basing this upon the Rashash, Bishalom Shar'abi. Side point: the Rashash Bishalom Shar'abi was the great-great-grandfather of Rabbi Shem Tov Gagin. Berakhah. He tells us, because you shouldn't just have a thought that I'm going to have Kavanah, rather you should verbalize it. You should say a L'Shem Yehud, okay, basically for the sake of unifying God's name. This is a very common concept in the Ben Ish Chai. And if you look at Sidurim that came out of Baghdad at that time period and post that time period, then if you look in Yerushalayim in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, the Sidurim that came out from Salah Yaqub Mansour, who based all his Sidurim that went by the name Tefillah Yesharim on the Ben Ish Chai. They all have the Shem Yehud before every prayer, before every Mizvah. The Sidur Od Yosef Hai, same thing. And this concept has continued into many Sidurim coming out of Israel, where you'll find this, the Shem Yehud, before every Tefillah and before every Mizvah. So obviously before putting on Talit, you have the Shem Yehud. Now the Shem Yehud before putting on Talit is not exclusive to the Ben Ish Chai, and we have all the Sidurim like Bet Obed and Bet Menuhat, Tefillat HaChodesh, and all the standard Sephardic Sidurim that were printed in Livorno, years before the Ben Ish Chai, also had various forms of, verbalizing your Kavanah before doing the Missvat. So it says, and he gives us more or less the verbiage of what he wants to say in this L'Shem Yehud. Okay? Vegam, he continues now, Vegam, Sarich lechaven be'ayed shemit'atef bo. And you also have to have kavanah at the time that you wrap yourself in it. שסיוונו הקדוש ברוך הוא להתעטף בו, כדי שנזכור כל מצוותיו לעשותן. That Borei Olam commanded us to wrap ourselves in the talit so we can remember all his mitzvot to enact them, to do them. וכת בוהה אחרונים, מי שאינו עושה כך, עליו נאמר, ותהי יראתם אותי מצוות אנשים מלומדה. Anybody who does not do this, in other words, have kavanah before you put it on, and kavanah at the time that you wrap, okay, in other words, you just monkey see, monkey do, you just, okay, we have to put on talit, throw on talit, don't think about it at all whatsoever. It's basically pasuk in Yeshaya. The people don't really care about me. They don't fear me. It's an exercise. It's something that you do. You see a red light, you stop. Okay, you get up in the morning, you put on talit. You don't think about it at all. Okay, there is no thought process over here. We're just a bunch of zombies. Okay, and obviously it's improper. This is the first halakha as per the Ben Ish Chai. This is the way he opens up. Now, we're going to start looking at some concepts that pertain to this, or at least one concept, I should say, and this is about the Shem Yehud. He's saying us that we have to verbalize it, we have to say it. If you look in Yalkut Yosef on Missvat Sissit, okay, check me on this. Rabbi Nathan, you could check page 27, or Tayet. He says, you're doing it in order to fulfill your obligation of the Mizvah. And there are those who say, no, it's enough to say the Berakhah. As long as I say the Berakhah with the proper thought, that's enough, and I don't need to actually do a L'Shem Yehud prayer prior to making the Berakhah. It's enough if I understand the Berakhah and what I'm coming to do with the Berakhah, what the Berakhah means. That's enough to awaken me to internalize the concepts and the thoughts of the Mizvah of Sissit. Okay, but if saying the Shem Yehud, okay, basically creates these thoughts in a person's mind that he's able to channel his thoughts a lot better, then obviously it's very proper for a person to say the Shem Yehud before putting on the Sissit, before putting on the Talih. So bottom line is that every person needs to know themselves. Okay? Ben Ish Chai tells you, you have to do it. Yalkut Yosef, Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef is telling you, you don't have to. if the Berakhah is enough for you to channel your thoughts. But if you find the Shem Yehud helps you more, then by all means do the Shem Yehud. Okay? So they're not.
What do you do?
What do I do? At times I say the Shem Yehud, at times I don't. When I have the extra time, I like to do it. And I say,
long?
I'll show you the one I say. The one I say is much longer than what the Ben Ish Hai has. Get it and I'll show it to you so you have an idea.
Did I stop the first tangent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More or less, Ben Ish Hai's version, or what has become common among those who follow the Ben Ish Hai's rulings.
And describes in Safari with English translation.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. So here is from the Sidur Obadia Yosef Hai. This is the Shem Yehud. Okay, it's pretty large font, and I don't know, about a dozen lines or so.
You need a mirror here so you can go.
Okay, well, I don't have them, so you can take a look at it. If you want to take a picture of it and send it to everybody, you know, you could do that.
You can do that. Send it to the chat.
This
Wait,
one,
you're saying yours is longer than that?
yeah,
It's crazy.
No.
yeah. This is this one. It's longer.
Okay.
I'm telling you, it's longer. I've said them both. This one's longer. Okay. So basically, for that first halakha, there's not much more, at least as far as Yalkut Yosef is concerned. Okay, but we have more, let's say, from Hakham Obadia. So Hakham Obadia, what does, and not Hakham Obadia, the printed books of Hakham Obadia Yosef that he wrote towards the end of his life, but rather from the She'elot Shubot Hakham Obadia, which originally came out on Hilchot Pesach back in the 50s. What does he say over there regarding the Shem Yehud and the whole concept over there? He tells you, "B'hadavar barur, shekol mizvah sheyesh aleha berakhah, haberakhah hi kavanah yoter hashuba v'hamukhiha shehu oseh l'shem mizvah." Any mizvah where you have a berakhah, that berakhah basically sets the framework for your kavanah. And it should set that framework for you more than anything else. Because if you're not paying attention to the Berakhah, you're not paying attention to anything at all. And once you pay attention to the Berakhah, then all of a sudden your channel, you have channeled your thoughts and your concepts and your ideas, and you know what you're doing and you know what you're doing it for. אני נוהג לומר בפי הנני עושה דבר זה לקיים מצוות בוראי. So he tells us that Noda Behuda, Rabbi Yehuda Landau, established a practice for himself that any mitzvah that does not have a berakhah preceding it, he would just say before doing the mitzvah, I hereby come to do this mitzvah that Borei Olam commanded me. It's enough to do that, and you don't have to say any more than that. ומוסיף שם, חכם עובדיה יוסף וחכם עובדיה adds, וישנו, ומה שתיקן הגאון רבי יוסף חיים, נוסח לשם ייחוד לכל מצווה ומצווה. Okay, so Hakham Obadia Yosef is telling us that Rabbi Yosef Hayim, the Ben Ish Hai, wrote actual L'Shem Yehuds for every mitzvah. ונתפסו במחזורים, and they've been published in the מחזורים. הנה ידוע שהגאון רבי יוסף חיים, חסדאים מלא על פי הקבלה, ואינם חיוב על פי ההלכה. Everything he did was acts of piety. He was a Hasid. And based upon the general framework or the letter of the law, be the best way to say it, there is no obligation to say any sort of L'Shem Yehud whatsoever. And anybody who says them and it helps him, to connect with Borei Olam, it's wonderful that he does it. Now here's another thought, not from the Ben Ish Hai and not from Hakham Obadia Yosef, but from Or Sion. Okay? Your friend, right, David? No, Ben Sion Abba Shaul. Okay, the Or Sion. Or Sion, in volume 2, he says in 3 places, and this is very interesting. If you look at the Halakha, let's open up the Halakha Shulchan Aruch for a second. Shulchan Aruch, Or Hayim, Missvat Sissit, Siman Het, Seif Het. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch 8:8. יכוון בהתעטפו שסיוונו הקדוש ברוך הוא להתעטף בו כדי שנזכור כל מצוותיו לעשותם. You have to have kavanah when you wrap yourself in the taled that Borei Olam commanded us to wrap ourselves in it in order to remember all the mizvot to do them. Okay? What does the Or Sion, Rabbi Ben Sion Abba Shaul tell us? Only in 3 places in the entire Shulchan Aruch does Maran tell us lechavin, to have kavanah. Only 3 places. Hilchot Sissit, Hilchot Tefillin, and Hilchot Sukkah. No place else. Okay? Berakhah. And therefore, Tov la'aseh yedei chobah lechulei alma v'yechavin bazeh. He goes, therefore, even if you don't generally say the Shem Yehuds, and you're not so careful having kavanah before you do mitzvah, with these 3 things, it's because it's only 3 things, okay? Make the extra effort. Sissit, Tefillin, Sukkah. Now you know why I said that longer one. Okay? That's Tefillat HaChodesh. That's just a newer printing of Tefillat HaChodesh. I could show you an older printing. It doesn't make a difference. It's non-Baghdadian.
Joey,
Yes,
question.
please. I'm waiting.
You in the class itself, we mentioned about the Kabbalistic ideas in terms of like not understanding them. In terms of the value, I wouldn't disagree about the value of stating something before it's getting done. But there's some things in the Shem Yehud that are totally above my head. I would say, do you skip them? Do you what's your take on?
So let's look at the L'Shem Yehud. Barry, pass the Sidur. No, the other one. Pass the Or Yosef Hai. Okay, so let's look at this particular L'Shem Yehud.
David just sent the picture, so I'm hoping it's the
Okay.
same one, but if not, no problem.
It should be the same one. Okay, the one that comes from the Or Yosef Hai. So Or Yosef Hai. Let's continue. Let's explain first of all. All right, we're looking at the one that comes from this Sidur. Okay, and starts over here. So you probably have that picture that David sent to you. Well, if you look at it, it tells you, Kodim sheyibarech al taled gadol b'boker, yomar l'shem yehud zeh me'ayin vav yod het. That's Or Yosef Hai. So Or Yosef Hai is another work of the Ben Ish Hai. It's basically a sister compendium volume to Ben Ish Hai, things that he didn't always teach in the class, things that he put down in writing, but he didn't tell everybody about, but they appear in the Od Yosef Hai. And that's where he has a lot of, these L'Shem Yehuds or whatever else it may be. And he repeats certain halakha, or halachot rather, for, what's the right word? Basically to further stress the importance. So let's look at this L'Shem Yehud. He starts, so like with every L'Shem Yehud that you see from the Ben Ish Hai, L'Shem Yehud Kudsha Berichu Shchenteh. Okay, for the sake of the unification of the holy name, okay, or the holy being, blessed be he, and the Shekhinah. Now, automatically that throws people off. What do you mean? I'm going to come and I'm going to unify God's name, God is two different parts, and I have to put them together. So that's where people seem to have a problem. Okay, and I'm guessing that's what you're referring to, right?
I guess it's more of the Frida Kelipot Shiralit Pared, Mikelim Shel
I'm not hearing you.
You're not so clear.
You're
Sorry.
not at all.
How about now?
Is that
Yeah,
what?
much better.
Is that what you?
I
have
think the
trouble with?
end. I think the ending.
I
I
didn't
think
even
the
get to the first
ending-
line.
I know.
Okay, so let's go through it. So you're looking at the ending. Fine, let's just talk at the beginning for a second. Okay, so every L'Shem Yehud of the Ben Ish Hai, and as well as other Mekubalim, will deal with this concept of, looking at Borei Olam as two parts, and by us doing the Missvat and having Kavanah, we're basically unifying and bringing it together. Obviously, Borei Olam is not split in pieces, and we're not putting Hashem together, but this is a lofty concept of the Kabbalah, that when we do things, we basically complete, what Borei Olam wants from us, and therefore it basically makes Borei Olam more involved in the world as a whole. Okay, that's really what it boils down to. Then he goes, right? So we have one part of Borei Olam is the first part, the Yod and the He, and the second part is the Vav and the other He. Okay, we put them together, then we have the Yod, and then we have the He, and then we have the Vav, and then we have the He, and we split Borei Olam's complete name. B'Shem Kol Yisrael, in the name of all Yisrael. Hareini Muchal Lekayem Asel L'Bosh Kalet Mesuyes Kalacha. Right, I have the Kavanah to wear the talit. كونت هلخا كموش سبان وما إلههم بتوراتها كدوشا معصودهم سيسير كان في بخدهم بهرين مفان لبريخ برخا شتكنوها خاميم بخرونان لبرخا, which is very, very clear. We want to fulfill the Missvat the way the Hakamim established it. Al Missvat Sissit betalit gedola, right? Missvat Sissit and on the large talit. V'harein mechaven liftor lebracha zo gam talit katana shel ala. You wear the talit katan, which we don't make a Berakhah on. And through this Berakhah and the Kavanah I'm having on the Talit Gadol, it also covers the smaller Talit that's already on my body. Okay, we'll skip the parenthesis for the moment. Now we're going to have the strength, okay, and the omes, we'll call it bravery or courage, okay, of this Missvat, from the two of them. Lehafrid kelipot. So these kelipot, okay, we'll call them the shells, the peels, okay, they usually refer to the negative energy, if you will. Okay, if you have an orange and you have the kelipa on the outside, this is something that's protecting until you actually get to the fruit which you want. But once you get to that fruit, this is all considered garbage. And so now, because we're doing the Missvat, we're coming together to do the Missvat, we're able to remove this garbage, this kelipa, and remove it so everything can come together in a wholesome fashion. That's what he's referring to over here. Again, I'm giving it to you in a very, very simplified form. All right, there's a big zivukim. All right, so basically creating a marriage now, okay, of these two talitot that you're wearing. And it's as if I'm having all the kavanah that you have to have in the mizvah. Okay, so again, this type of l'shem yahud, this type of prayer is not for everybody. Okay, and that's really what your question is. So you have to skip things that don't pertain. Now, Barry, if you see the other siddur, okay, I'm going to show Rabbi Nathan. You sent this picture also?
David sent the other one was,
No, I don't.
David sent the other one. That one was had a lot more detail of Kabbalistic ideas than this one did.
Different ideas though. Very different ideas, in my opinion. Okay, because look at it. The other one, no, I disagree. The Ben Ish Chai was very heavy on the Kabbalistic point. This one over here, הנה אנוכי בא להתעטף גופי בטלית של סיסית כדי לקיים את בוראי. כתוב בתורה ועשו להם סיסית בכליהם לדורותם ונתנו על סיד הקנה פתיתכת. וכשם שאני מתעטף גופי בסיסית, כך לתעטף נשמתי ורמח איבריי ושסה גידיי באור הסיסית העולה תרי"ג. There's nothing heavy Kabbalistic there so far. Basically the same way I'm getting dressed in my talit, okay? What's happening over here? You're basically, I'm asking of you, Borei Olam, to wrap up my neshama, okay? And what do you call it? You have the 248 Ibarim and the 365 Gidim in the light of the Sissit, which totals 613. In other words, so my whole body is basically encompassed in Mizvot, if you will. וכשם שאני מתכסה בטלית בעולם הזה, כך אזכה לחלוקה דרבנן טלית נאה לעולם הבא בגן עד עליון. Same way, so I'm now wrapping the talit over here to do mizvah over here in this world. When the time comes that I'm up in the olam ha'alyon, okay, in the next world, I'm also going to be wrapped in mizvot, right? Because they say, Harambam says, what do you see in olam haba? You see the neshamot, you know, wrapped in what do you call it, in the order of Borei Olam and studying, if you will. Again, I'm trying to oversimplify concepts that may not be easy for people to grasp. And through the Missvat of Sissit, may my nefesh, my ruach and neshama, okay, may all be saved, and my, as well as my prayer, from any sort of outside forces that may want to hurt them. Okay, now these could be physical forces, it could be spiritual forces, it could be any force. Now, figuratively, talit spreads its wings, if you will, over them and saves them. Like an eagle, like a vulture, however you want to translate the ignition. ובכן, אני באתי להוסיף קדושה בעליונים וטהר העוונות וכל הפעימות שעשיתי בעיניי בידיי בגופי בעולם הזה. Okay, and through this mizvah, okay, it's coming to add kedusha above and to purify the avonot that I may have done. ובכן, ירשום לפניך אמונה אלוהי ואבותיי, תהיה חשובה בזבת עטיפת הלל לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, כאילו קיימתיה בכל פרטיה ודקדוקיה וכוונותיה ותראה מצוות העובדים בהר ושלה ונועם. So it's a very different text than that of Rabbi Yosef Hayim. I think this one, the older text, is much easier for the average person to grasp. There's still other texts as well. I'm just showing you the two more common ones. Again, if it doesn't work for you and it takes away your kavanah and doesn't allow you to really embrace the mizvah and have kavanah like Shulchan Aruch is telling you, then don't say it at all. Focus on the Berakhah and knowing what the Berakhah is being said on and why we have this mizvah. Somewhat good?
Joey,
Yes.
even Ishai himself says, "Velachin tov lomar b'fiv kodem beracha."
Yes.
It doesn't say it as like a halacha.
No, he never. We never said he said it's what you call it's obligatory in any way. No. Why would you think that? Rabbi Nathan?
just from the presentation of the Hakham Obadia piece, meaning he's not saying that it's a Hayub.
But Hakham Yosef never referred to it as called it a Hayub. Okay? He said, again,
I
look
know
at
that.
What?
Why'd you bring the Yaakov Yosef and Hakham Obadia for what purpose?
To basically show you that you don't have to. Some people, when they read the Ben Ish Chai, and the Ben Ish Chai has now recommended to you saying the Shem Yahud, so how can you not come and say the Shem Yahud when you have this great holy Kabbalist telling you this is something worthwhile to do? You're not going to do it? See, we live in a generation of it's like chicken soup. Okay? Anytime you tell somebody, no, but do it anyway. It's like chicken soup. It can't hurt. It can only help. Okay? Like I have arguments with some people some mornings where after Adinu Shabbat, they insist to say that David Adonai Urivi Yish'im Mi'ira, that whole Mizmor. And I tell them, well, we don't say it. No, but it's another Mizmor. Say it. It can't hurt. It's like chicken soup. It only helps. Okay? So the same thing over here. L'Shem Yahud. Okay? So Hakham Yosef needs to dispel those ideas. You know, so people don't walk away thinking, well, Rabbi Yosef Chaim said it, so we have to do it. Even though he only recommended it, people take recommendations, you know, from a great Hakham as something that everybody really ought to be doing. Okay? And that's why I think whether it's the Hazon Obadia or the Yalkut Yosef, both said what they said. That's my interpretation of it. Not because they told you it's obligatory, but they're showing you that it's not only did the Yosef Chaim only recommend it, they're telling you it's not obligatory at all. Okay? That's the way I see it. And if you only look at the Od Yosef Hai, okay, of Rabbi Yosef Hayim, he doesn't tell you Tob, he tells you, it seems correct to do it. So you're going to have a harder time to argue with somebody about something that Rabbi Yosef Hayim told you is nachon to do. Okay? Therefore, they need to come and they need to set the record straight on such an issue.
Where does he say the nachon phraseology?
In his book, Od Yosef Hai. Okay? Same
Right.
place. Beresheet, Missvat Sissit, Halacha Aleph.
He said he using two different Lashonot. By the Shem Yikud, this is Berakhah Tov Lomar.
Right.
And the other one, in terms of the Gam Sarich, the Chaven, the Chaven edition is called Kol Missvotav.
Right.
Study that he's saying it's more of a story.
To have Kavanah.
Yeah, about
But
what
not
the
to say,
Missvat
but not to
Sissit.
say L'Shem Yehud.
That's Tov.
Right, Tov. But over here in the Od Yosef Hai, which I told you is a compendium volume written by him to the Ben Ish Hai, he tells Nachon. Okay, it's correct to do it. So the Tov, it's good, and now it's correct. So you have to let the people know whether they have to do it or not. People that read the average person reading these words, I got to do it. I can't get out of it.
This Siddur, what Siddur do you have?
I'm sorry?
This other Siddur that you were looking at.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, when was that published? What's the story behind that one?
That's a whole class by itself, and we did one piece beginning of one class years ago about it. If you like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll get to it, but
Okay.
goes back to over 200 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, again, this is one of the more recent publications, easier to read.
With all the shaming codes in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. All right, I think we're ready.
Joey, in Halab, the Sidurim that we use have L'Shem Yehud in it?
In Halab, okay, since we want to talk about
Or Egypt, or Egypt, or Egypt.
Let's talk about Halab for a second. So on the simplest terms, let's talk, we're in Halab now, 1850, okay? Before people left Halab to, venture out to the United States or to England or South America, wherever else they may have gone, okay? We're not going to talk about India because I know Barry's going to tell us about, 1789 and
I don't
Calcutta.
even think about it.
Yeah.
Now you mention it.
Okay, so for the most part, the Jews of Aleppo, even though they were trading with various parts of the world, for the most part, they stayed put. So 1850 Aleppo, most Sidurim came from Livorno, Italy. And the more common Sidurim, okay, where you have the Beit Obed and Beit Menuha, which were respectively for weekdays and for Shabbat, and those were put together by Hakham Yehuda Shemuel Ashkenazi, and they were published in Livorno. The first printing was 1843. Okay, that's why I mentioned 1850. And those books were used more by Hachamim than by the laymen. But the laymen, for the most part, were using Tefillat HaChodesh. Okay, Tefillat HaChodesh is one of the Tefillat HaChodeshes. Tefillat HaChodesh, as well as these Beit Obed, Beit Menuha, had L'Shem Yehud and other things in them as well. Now, what did the average person do? Some said it, and some didn't say it. Nobody forced the recitation of these things, but Halab, for the most part, the people, especially at that time period, were still more or less well-read, learned people, and they were able to open up, almost any book and understand a lot of different things. And if the person was inclined to attach himself to such practices and do them, they did them. And if he didn't want to, then he didn't do them. And nobody, was the wiser either way. People didn't say, oh, I'm better than you because I do it and you're worse than me because you don't do it. It didn't work that way. Okay? Those who wanted to did it. Those who didn't want to didn't do it. Everybody ended up praying together, and doing their things. And those who want to come early, because they want to say extra things beforehand, or those who want to stay later and say things afterwards, everybody had their way. Well, I don't think it was a major issue. But now, Besibur, okay, this makes a difference. Besibur, when they were getting up to Hazan and do things, the L'Shem Yehud, as a general rule, was not said in Halab. So you didn't get a guy get up to pray Minha, for example, on a weekday and say L'Shem Yehud before Minha. If you go to Israel today, especially in Yerushalayim, almost every Sephardic minyan, before they start Minha, starts with L'Shem Yehud. The Hazan says it publicly, out loud. L'Shem Yehud, Kucha, Brich, Kusha, David, Hilu, Rahim, Rahim, Hilu, Yahadash, Ibn Kebaf, Yahadash, Shem will say, Hine, Nahu, Bayit, Talet, Thad, Minha, Shidi, Kedis, Hakabin, Walab, Shalom. And then they keep going on and on and on. That definitely was not done in Halab. Okay? And if anybody attempted to do such a thing, they were basically gonged. Okay? So that's that. Fair? We're clear? Good. Halacha bet. Halacha bet. Yibarech Lehitatef Bessissit Besheba Tahat Bet Velo Bepatah. Okay, so simply put, he's telling you that you make the Berakhah Lehitatef Bessissit, not Bessissit. Okay? The Bet gets a Sheba, not a Patah. וצריך לכוון בברכת התלד גדול לפתור תלד קטן שעליו שלא פשטו בלילה. You heard that? Yeah, you don't take off your talit katan at night. You're sleeping with your talit katan. You never took it off. And when you make the berakhah talit gadol in the morning, you have kavanah for this talit katan that was still on you. Okay? Mishum de'ika de'sebira lehu shesarich lebarech al talit katan b'boker. Because there is an opinion that you need to make a berakhah talit katan in the morning. But because of the concept of safek berachot le'akel, when you're in doubt about reciting the berakhah, we are lenient in the sense that we don't make the berakhah because we don't want to say God's name in vain. Okay, and so therefore we do not make the berakhah. V'chatabti B'Sefri HaKatan Mekabsi'el. So the Ben Ish Chai has a third book called Mekabsi'el. Most of Mekabsi'el was basically lost, okay? And only bits and pieces remained around. And in the last couple of decades, they were able to find other portions of it in manuscript form. And now recently they printed them all together, everything that they found of it, and it's still lacking most of it. So they printed this as a set now, Ben Ish Chai and Od Yosef Chai and Mekabsi'el. That's why you see the same color and cover on these three books. Comes together as a set now. And he tells you, and I wrote in my small work, Mekabsi'el, he refers to all his works as my small work. De'im yichaven bechach, sagi behachi, ve'en sarich lemashmesh b'talet katan b'sha'at berakhah gam ledat maran. And if you have kavanah at the time, when you're making the Berakhah on talit gadol, having the kavanah for talit katan, that is enough, it's sufficient. And you don't have to be me shemesh. In other words, you don't have to touch it. Now, some people will tell you when if you're saying Berakhah on one thing that's covering something else, you have to touch it, okay? Or, so in this case, you're saying Berakhah on talit gadol, but make sure you touch the talit katan that you're already wearing. It's enough to have kavanah. You don't have to do that. Gam le'da'at Maran, even according to the opinion of Maran. Ve'al ken, kevan, she'ashicha misuya ba'adam. Even though we know people tend to be forgetful, u'mishtadeh ve'lo mechaven lef'amim, and people forget mishtadeh v'shocheyah, right? Ve'lo mechaven lef'amim, and they don't have kavanah at times. Le'chach נכון שירגיל עצמו להוסיף בנוסח לשם ייחוד כתושב לחושנתה הנזכר לעיל עוד דברים אלו והרי מוכן לברך על עטיפת הטלית כתיקון חכמינו זכרם לברכה והרי מכוון לפסול ברכה זו גם הטלית קטן שעלי. So he's telling you why he has added those words into the Shem Yehud and why people should say those extra words into the Shem Yehud, because people tend to be forgetful. It's human nature. And so therefore, when you say the Shem Yehud, that for your Talit Gadol, also have intention for the Talit Katan. And so you don't forget to have intention and Kavanah and focus on Talit Katan that's already on you. I've added these words for you to say in the Shem Yehud as well. Clear? Good. Now. Okay. So Lehitatef Bessissit. Okay. First of all, most people nowadays are used to modern Hebrew. You see the Ben Ish Chai wrote Sheba with the letter Bet. And we're used to it from modern Israeli Hebrew as Sheva with a Vav. Okay, just keep that in mind, that the old way among at least the Iraqi Jews was not Sheva, because then it would be a Shewa. All right, so over here it's a Sheba. Lehitatef Bessissit. If a person to the Yalkut Yosef, okay, Missvat Sissit, page 38, item number 14. Well, don't you get?
That's the Shabbat, the Nikuda. If I spell it with the bit, shin bit al.
You following? No. Okay.
Should also spell Shin Vav Aleph or no?
Right, you know it is Shin Vav Aleph.
That's what I read. I mean, I see it in all those grammar books. People, yeah.
Right, but he doesn't. But Ben Ish Chai doesn't write like that. He writes a Shin Bet Aleph.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really.
Well, that's
There you go. That's what I was pointing out.
Okay.
Just a side point. Okay. Lehitatef Bessissit. Yalkut Yosef, what does he say? V'im ta'af, made a mistake. Uberach al talet gadol al Missvat Sissit. Let's say by mistake you didn't say Berakhah Lehitatef Bessissit, but you made Berakhah al Missvat Sissit, which is what the Sidurim show you to make on Talit Katan. Okay? Or you made up your own Berakhah, the Lehitatef Bessissit. Okay, to get dressed in a Sissit, or anything along those lines, Yasa, you still fulfilled your obligation. Okay, so this is nothing to come against Ben Ish Chai. This is just, he's giving you a more encompassed halacha for you to be aware of things. Now, the Ben Ish Chai is telling us to say it with a sheva, with a bessissit, not bessissit. Okay? Lehitatef Yosef tells us, if accidentally, sheta'a uberach b'nikud patah tahat habed, you said bessissit, you still fulfill the obligation, and you don't have to go back and make the Berakhah again. So even though you didn't do it the right way, it's still enough for you to get a passing grade. Okay, you should obviously learn from your mistakes and not do it going forward, but it's all right. Don't worry about it. Okay. Yeah, nothing else to really say on that particular one. I just want to see one thing over here. Okay. Right. So the reason, though, that it's okay if you said it with a patah, because there are certain hachamim, generally among the Ashkenazim, who tell you that the proper way to say it would be with a patah. And so therefore, if you did that, that's why you have sources to rely upon, and you don't have to go back and say it otherwise. But the minhag of the Sephardim and the communities of the Middle East is always to say it with a sheva, okay, the two dots, the sheva, and we have to be careful to adhere to our minhag as such. Okay, fine. Any questions, guys? Just make sure you stop me. הלכה ג' קודם שיברך יעיין ויבדוק בחוטי הסיסית שלא יהיה בהן חיסרון הפוסל. Okay, before you make the Berakhah, you have to really scrupulously check the strings of the Sissit that they're not lacking in any way that may make them pasul. Okay, you don't want it to be invalidated, and then obviously you'd have a problem with the Berakhah, a problem wearing a garment that doesn't have the required strings, and that's obviously a sin. וגם יפריד הסיסיות בידיו שלא יהיו החוטים מסובכים זה בזה, and you have to also separate each string from each other so they're not entangled within one another. ורק בשבת לא יפריד אלא יבדקם בלבד. But on Shabbat you cannot separate, so just check them. וגם עוד יזהה בכל יום לבדוק ולעיין החוטים למעלה בקרן במקום הנקב. And every day, make sure when you check them that you look actually at the corner and at the hole where they're coming through to make sure that there's no cuts, no tears, that they are complete. שאם נפסק שם אפילו חוט אחד פסול, because if even one string is cut, it can make the whole thing pasul. ובשעת الضحك, now if you're in a pinch, שיחל לבוא, you arrive late. או שהסיבור ממתינין עליו לעשות פתיחת ההיכל או לקרוא בתורה, or the sibur is waiting for you as a particular individual for פתיחה or for an aliyah or something. יוכל לסמוך חזקה ולא יבדוק באותה הפעם. You can rely upon, how do you want to translate חזקה? Upon
established.
It's not established though, no.
Precedence.
I'm sorry?
Precedence.
Precedence works for me. Thank you. Okay, rely upon precedence and not check that time. Doesn't mean that you could always rely upon it, but at that time you can rely upon it, not check. וכן מי שהולך בדרך, okay, ואין בידו לתקן, כתבו האחרונים שיסמוך על החזקה ולא יבדוק. And somebody who's traveling and he's not going to be able, if he finds a problem, to correct it, such a person should also rely on precedence and not check. Okay, because then he can find himself in a situation where he's stuck. Therefore, rely upon it. So, what's the story of it? You said, right? You have to really look at your seat strings very carefully. So Yalkut Yosef, what did he tell us? ויש נוהגים לומר בעת בדיקת הסיסיות את הפסוקים ברכי נפשי את אדוני אלוהי גדלתם מאוד הוד הלל לבא שתי עות ואור כסלמה תשע קריעה. Right? We have the first two pesukim of that mizmor, and there are those who say those pesukim when checking the tzitzit. Okay? Don't you do it, David? You don't do it, do you? I do. Okay, anyway. Most of the old timers did it. Nathan, for you, even in Halab, it was very common for people to do it as well. Among many Sephardim, it was common practice. עדיין לא בירך ברכות התורה, נכון שלא לומר פסוקים הנזכרים, but if you still have not said ברכות התורה, okay, then it's proper for you not to say such פסוקים. שיש לחוש לסברת הפוסקים המצליחים לברך ברכות התורה, גם קודם אמירת פסוקים שלא בדרך קריאה ולימוד. Because we have to be concerned with the opinion of the Hachamim that say that even if you're just reciting Pesukim, you still must say Bechot Torah beforehand. And generally, that is the accepted practice that, we don't say anything until we say Bechot Shahar followed by Bechot Torah. Okay, and therefore, I don't see why this guy would be checking his talit and saying Pesukim to put on talit if he's not going to at that moment. Okay, finish Bechot Torah and then move on. Everything has to be in a certain order. Makes much more sense that way. Now he says over here, the Shabbat lo yafid. On Shabbat, you do not separate the strings because it's generally considered, tikkun. Okay, you're fixing. Okay, and that would be haram to do on Shabbat.
But so even if they're like all clumped up together,
All clumped up together. Now, so if that tends to be something that you generally find, then that's something like, let's go back in time, okay? For some reason, our strings today are better than they were 40 years ago. 40 years ago, we used to see just, this glob of mess for some reason. And so people that were more scrupulous would make sure to separate the Sissit strings before Shabbat.
And the price you pay. It's crazy. Techel is so expensive.
There was no Techel then.
Yeah.
Techel is not so expensive.
I bought last year, it was expensive.
What do you consider expensive?
20.
Yeah. It's not bad at all.
Techel was like 150 or something.
Truth is, though, think about how long it lasts. No, it's not
The quality now, but the price.
well, much better. Okay, but the string quality was bad back then. Forget about Techel. There was no Techel, and the string quality was very bad. Well, let's what is saying over here. בשבת לא יפיד, וכתב הרב שמותר בשבת להפריד בנח חוטי הסיסית שנסתבכו זה בזה. So, there seems to be an opinion that you would gently unravel on Shabbat those that are tied together. אלא אם כן חדשים הם ונסתבכו זה בזה אחר כשירתם, שאז לא יפרידים פני שגורמים מלאכתם ונחשב הדבר למתקן מעינה. So in a case where it's a fairly new sissit that you just put on it, maybe you never really finished putting them on properly, and that's why they're still, bunched up together and raveled together. And by you separating them, it's as if you're finishing the work that you should have finished before Shabbat. And in such a case, you shouldn't be separating them. ובמות החול, but on a weekday, צריך להפריד הסיסיות קודם שברך ויתעטף. You have to separate them before you make the Berakhah and wrap yourself. בין אם היו חדשים ובין אם היו ישנים, whether it's new or old. וננו האחרונים סימן דבר בשם רבנו הארי, סיסית ראשי תיבות, צדיק יפריד סיסיותיו תמיד. Okay, so saying that the Aharonim made a Rashi Tibot from the word Sisit. Sisit is spelled without a second Yod, right? It's Sadi, Yod, Sadi, Tav. Okay? So they made Sadiqim Yafrid Sisiyotam Tamid. Means a Sadiq, a righteous person, should always separate his Sissit strings. Okay. Anyway, that's Hadichot Olam. That's Hakham Obadia Yosef himself, and as well as Yalkut Yosef, they both bring the same idea, the same concept.
He didn't have such an issue of separating them.
Hmm?
How many that doesn't have such an issue as long as you do it gently?
As long as it's done gently.
It's just 150 years later.
So what's the tikkun? How is it even? Let's say it is bunched up. How is it a tikkun?
Why?
It's asking. Why is it a melacha? Why is it a told? No, whatever.
Hakham Obadia Yosef is referring to as Meteken Mina. Okay, you're completing the action. The action of tying them together. When you tie them together,
Separating them, I thought.
well, the separating is part of the tying them. When you first apply them, okay, you're putting these strings onto your talit, okay, and you're tying and tying and tying and then making knots and going around. Then at the end, you come and you separate it. Because you're not separating it, it's all part of that initial work of tying.
What did I get?
That's what he seems to be saying to me.
So what is the?
So your question is on the Beresheet.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we didn't finish. We didn't finish yet. Okay, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna continue with what we have over here, and then we're gonna go over here, over there, jumping all over the place. Okay. Just want to see. Okay. Then we said Yizahir b'chol yom, right? Beresheet tells us וגם עוד יזהר בכל יום לבדוק ולעיין החוטאים. So יבדוק ויזהר בכל יום. וכתב הרב שמעיקר הדין אין חובה לבדוק הסיסיות בכל פעם קודם שמתעטף בתלית. So Hakham Obadia Yosef is saying no, there's no obligation. You don't have to check the strings each and every time before you put it on talit. ורק ממידת חסידות נכון לבודקן קודם ברכה. There's only a pious action to check the strings before you make the Berakhah. Im yesh lo peinai lekach. If you happen to have free time for that. V'im hoshesh shemechamad b'dikat hasisiyot yafsid tefillah b'sibur. But if you're concerned that when you're spending this time checking the strings, you're going to end up missing tefillah b'sibur. Now I don't know how you can miss tefillah b'sibur just checking the strings. It doesn't take more than a minute. Probably less than that. Or you're going to have to skip a portion of the prayer because you're checking. Lo yibduk kela. Don't check whatsoever. Don't check at all. In such a case, there's not even midat hasidut. It's not even a pious act. If he hid his talit in a secure place, in other words, you put it in your kuracha, you took it off, you put it in your kuracha, nobody else touched it in between, you know what it looked like beforehand. And sarich libdok hasisiyot kodem Berakhah ke'elan. You never have to check your sisit. Fine. Okay? Now, why can't they get, messed up? That you'd never have to check them. I personally, I'm uncomfortable with such a thing. Maybe because I grew up always checking them and always being taught to check them. Okay? And definitely on, let's say, when you're going to Knis and you're using somebody else's talit, the one that belongs to Knis, you're definitely checking the sisi before you put it on. A lot of times you find that they're missing strings even. I don't know about all the time, but
Certain places are better.
yeah. So I think it's important to check. Even though Hakham Obadia Yosef is telling you don't have to, and if it was in a secure place, I think Hakham Arab Beresheet. I think every person needs to be smart about it and determine when he needs to check or when he doesn't need to check. But to give a blanket statement, always check or always don't check, or don't always check rather, I don't think that's prudent, in my opinion. Okay, let's go back in now. كل شبريخ يعين ويدوق بحوتي السيسيل بيسد already إن صورك من الدين اللي بدوق السيسيل بكل طعم Hakham Obadia Yosef writes this in Yehaveh, by the way. Okay, fine. ורק בשבת לא יפריד. So Hakham Obadia Yosef in Yabiya Omer talks about this. העילה להקל להפרידה משבת, ורק בפעם הראשונה לאחר תליית וקישת חוטי הסיסית בטלית, אם הם מסובכים אין להפרידה משבת. Over there he brings his ruling where he says you can gently separate them on Shabbat, except for the first time when you first put it on, because you may not have finished what you had to do beforehand. Doesn't answer our question as to what's bothering the Benish Hai yet, though. אבל החמיקים מותר. ועיין בניש חי שנה שנייה פרשת נוח עוד כ"א משמע דהוא עצמו סיבירה די להתיר אם לא לאור הנר. Okay, well, we're not going to get up to שנה שנייה of Benish Hai for quite some time. So possibly in this other book called, what do you call it, Peri Ilan, he may tell us why the Benish Hai mentioned something about that. Shabbat, there we go. All right. Yeah, so he brings us a whole listing. He tells you on Shabbat you cannot separate them based upon the Hida and the Shalmi Sibur and the Ginat Veradim. Mita'am Isul Tikun Mana. The question is what Tikun Mana is over here. Correct, Mo?
Yep.
Let's see if we find more. Abal. عين بسفر يفعل ذلك شيء سيقال دبرها حدا دهو مبوء مدبرها أحرار يمشى يسوه دافكا كيش مفردين نور النير بحيشينان شمية طير بعوض مبوء مدبرها كان هم يدفش دافكا إن نستبخ وحوتين بشعتك تشيرا إيكا يسوه تكون معناها بلادها أخي مطالع في لحوتين أف بشبات. So they seem to be going against this tikkun mana, and that the whole concept of not separating on Shabbat stemmed from the possibility of a guy going to stand by a candle or an oil wick or wherever it may be, and you may end up not, because you can't see well enough, you end up start playing with the fire on Shabbat, so you can get a better view of what's going on. ועين ربنا بصوف برشات نوح الشنا شنيات مشان لخوران الأش سوتيد بلا مكان تهكا تاب شيء أسود بدوق ده فيه السيوب ده وهالنير شباك السيوب من حرابين هالبيت مش معمد بلاش داف كده وهالنير أسود في المشبات. So he's saying the same thing Hakham Obadia Yosef said, that if you look at Benish Hai year 2 Parashat Noah, he may be basically retracting what he said over here, and only in the case of if you're doing this by a candle, and therefore you wouldn't be able to. So let's say you were standing outside in the bright sunlight, you wouldn't have a problem. Okay, and generally we're Sissit in the daytime, not at night. So why using candles anyway? وشوف هذه خد علام كتابة جون النبي يوسف لهابيل أيام كان شاف ذات البن إن يسوب هفرادتان وهيوم كان كتاب عين شو بنقول ده بريم سفر قال هميت بإيش يقول يسود وهيوم ودافك بيوفنش بيكون مياد أحد عصياتان شاء إنه في دينا أحد شيئتان حفيد جمال من الأخاء. Right, talking about finishing the work only on the first time that you first tied the string, but after that, such a issue would not apply whatsoever. So basically, he's repeating the same thing and bringing more proofs for it. And most of it seems to be based upon Gad HaMelech. Gad HaMelech is Rabbi Abraham HaLevi, who was one of the chief rabbis in Egypt in the late 16th, early 17th century. Okay. That's it for that halacha. And we continue. All right, halacha dalet. Gam talit qatan yizaheh lebudko kodem. So even talit qatan, you should be careful to check it before wearing it. Ubazet hiye gam ishto mesayyaat mizvah. And in the issue of talit qatan, your wife should be involved in helping you in such a mizvah. שתהיה זהירה לבדוק טלית קטן בעת שמזמנת בגדים לבעלה להחליפם. That she herself should be careful to check the talit katan at the time that she brings out the clothing for her husband to get dressed. Yes, this is very, very common in the Middle East. Okay, it may have been common elsewhere, but in the Middle East, in Muslim society for sure, it was known that your wife would wake up before you and she would give you your clothing, one item of clothing at a time, when you would get dressed. It was a common practice. Wife who didn't do such a thing was not considered a proper wife. Laugh, but that was societal norm. And obviously it was the same way among the Jews, according to what Ben Ish Hai is telling us. So she should be careful to separate the strings of the sissit. Because of the laundering of the talit katan, surely the strings would get entangled within one another. And through this, she would end up getting a mizvah for herself. She would get reward for this mizvah of saving her husband from doing isur. But sometimes a man he's in a rush and he's not really paying attention to what he's doing. He's getting dressed and getting out of the house. He may not be paying attention to the strings himself, but a good wife checks the strings before handing it to her husband. But even if all this Beresheet says, the man should not rely upon his wife, and he should still check the strings himself and before making the Berakhah. Now, is he telling us then to make a Berakhah on talit katan? Before he did, he told us not to.
Right.
Over here, though, it makes it seem like you would. Right. But I'm saying, we need to clarify that. Okay, there's nothing to add over here as far as I know. Nothing. Okay. Halakha here. Seder atifat talit gadol hukach. How do we put on talit gadol? What is the order of putting on talit gadol? Now, if you recall, in a previous class when we discussed putting on talit gadol, we demonstrated putting on talit gadol. Okay, we may be saying something here now that's going to be different than that. Keep that in mind. So it tells you, Ahar siyum Berakhah ta'atif bo roshecha bilbad. Because after making the Berakhah, only wrap your head. Only your head. So that means you have now, and you see some people do, they basically bunch up the entire talit, okay? It's a small piece, and you'll see they put it only on their head and they wrap it around their neck. It's not falling on their body whatsoever. That's what he seems to be saying over here. Okay? ולא כאותם מתחכמים לעטף בו כל גופם מתחילה. And not those guys who are smart Alex, okay? That they wrap their entire body from the beginning. דאין לנו אלא דברי רבנו הארי. Because we only have the Ari, okay? ואחר שעטפת בו ראשך, יהיו 4 כנפות יורדין על הכתפיים לצד פאים. Only after you wrap your head, then you let the 4 corners, okay, drape down the shoulders in front of you. שיניים על צד ימין ושיניים על צד שמאל. 2 on the right and 2 on the left. As to has תחילה בשיניים של צד ימין, then you hold the 2 on the right side, ותשליכם לאחוריך, and throw them behind you לצד שמאל. שיהיו כרוכים סביב צוואריך על כתף השמאלי לאחור. That they be wrapped around your neck on the shoulder from the left side and back. ושניים השמאליים יישארו תלויים נגד פניך. And the 2 left ones remain hanging in front of you, draped in front of you. ותמתין מעט שיעור מהלך 4 אמות ופחות מעט. Remain in such a position for the amount of time that would take you to walk 4 amot or slightly less. That's a couple of seconds. ותחזור ותשליך אותם השיניים השמאליים גם כן לאחוריך לשמאל. And then throw back those two that are on the left side in front, throw them backwards. באופן שעתה נעשו כל הארבע כנפות תלויים לאחוריך ביחד בצד שמאל. So now all of them are behind you on the left side, all four. ותמתין שיעור מהלך 4 אמות, and wait again for the amount of time that will take you to walk 4 אמות, ואז תוריד הטלית הכרוך בספריך על כל גופך. And then lower the talit that's wrapped around your neck upon your entire body. ועתה תהיה מעוטף בו ראשך וגופך ביחד. And now your entire head and body are wrapped together in the talit. כן מפורש בספר כוונות דרוש הסיסית פרק א', that's what's written out in ספר כוונות, וחומוש דקדק יפה הרב מת יעקב, וכן מפורש להגיע בסידור רבנו הרשש, ומה שכתבתי שיהיה בין השלכה שתיים הימני לשלכה שתיים השמאליים שיעור הולך 4 אמות, זהו מפרש כהגיע בדברי החז"ל והרשש, אך הואיל פרשם צריך לכוון בזה כוונות כפי עצמו, ובזה כוונת לפני עצמו, והשלכה שתיים דחילה בראש שתיים המסועדים, עודם צדדים לפני הסלם, ובזה עניין לפני עצמו, ואנחנו מכוונים בכוונות האלו, לכך די לנו שנשהה הילוך 4 אמות, כדי לקיים ההוראה של מעשיך הזו, כמו שנאמר, עד עד לבדו, וריח תנסינו בין עד לבין עד. The last part really needs no explanation. He's just telling you what he based himself upon and why he told you have to wait the amount of walking 4 amot between each and each, and it doesn't really apply. So he gave us the order of how we put on our talit. Now, do we put on our talit like that? Well, to a certain degree. The first part, I would say, for most people, no. Okay.
Don't we have a video putting out?
We did, yes. But I'm saying, so in my video, I don't put, what I do does not follow what he tells us to do in the beginning.
It's not that different though.
The beginning part is different.
How's the beginning different?
The beginning part is telling you over here, don't let it hit your body. It's only hitting your head. Okay?
Only for like basically your neck up.
Yeah.
You say the Berakhah, the whole time like this, just wrap, you would just swing it back? Or?
Yeah.
One at a time, right? So like 1, 4, sometimes
How long does it take you to walk 6 feet?
2 seconds.
No, not even. Not 3 seconds, much less.
2 seconds, okay, whatever.
Yeah, nothing. Okay, so let's see what we have over here. So first thing he tells you, right? There's about 6 word over here, halakha. So he tells you in Yalkut Yosef, v'yesh lebarech kodem halibisha b'sha'a shekavar ohez biyadot talit. And you have to make the Berakhah before you wear it, at the time that you're already holding the talit. V'lo be'esha talit adayin mekupel. Not, you can't make the Berakhah while the talit is still folded and just sitting there. Shekol hamizvot mibarech alehen ober la'asiyatan. Now this doesn't make sense because we know that already. That any mizvah we do, we make the Berakhah before the action. Okay? So you would think it was before the action. So okay, so the talit can be sitting there wrapped up, and I finish the Berakhah, and then I'm going to take it and unravel it and then put it on. So no, you have to actually be holding it, okay, to make the Berakhah. I don't know what he's basing it upon, but maybe we'll come across it. Roshecha bilbad. What do you mean only your head? Okay, so it's ta'atef bo roshecha bilbad. Wrap only your head. ויש להקפיד שהעטיפה בטלית לא תהיה באופן שיכסה את כל הפנים והעיניים. So in Yalkut Yosef telling you, be very careful that when you do the atifa, it does not wrap your face, that it ends up wrapping your entire face as well as your eyes. We know that we refer to this atifa as atifat hayishme'alim, okay? The wrapping of the Muslims, okay? Think of a Bedouin, how they wrap themselves, where their face, okay, especially their, most of their face, especially their eyes are not covered up. And you see people today that don't know, and they do that Lehitatef Bessissit, they don't say the entire face is covered. You don't know who's under the talit at all. because they don't know what to do. You have to make sure that everything is discernible, okay, and you can be distinguished, okay. לא תהיה באופן שיכסה את כל הפנים והעיניים, אלא העטיפה צריכה להיות על הראש וסביב הסבר והסנטר למטה מפיו. So it has to be below your mouth, in other words, from here down. Okay, so let's say from here to here cannot be covered up. Okay, figure from top of your eyes to the bottom of your lower lip cannot be covered.
Where are you reading from right now?
I'm reading Lehitatef Yosef right now. Okay. והנוהגים לכסות פניהם ועיניהם בשעת עטיפה, and anybody who covers up their entire face and their eyes when they do עטיפה, מנהג טעות הוא בידם. This is a mistaken custom that they have. ועליהם לשנות מנהגם, and such people have to take it upon themselves to change their practice. Okay. Now he tells you the en lanu illa the brera binu ha'ari. We only have the words of the ari. Meaning what? Does that mean we only follow the ari for anything and everything? Does it refer to the ari only over here? What does he mean by it? And the reason I'm saying that question is that we're going to find throughout the Ben Ish Hai, he uses this terminology of en lanu illa the brera binu ha'ari, but he doesn't always adhere to it. Even though we get the feeling that he does, we have other places we know exactly what the Ari says, and he, for some reason, he just doesn't follow, with that, not even mindset, but with with the rulings of the Ari. Okay? So he tells me, كتب הרב שיש נוהגים כפי המנהג אותו הביאה רמאה כשאין בנו הארי, ומנהג זה נכון על פי ההלכה, ויש נוהגים שמיד אחר שניהם ברכת הליטאי בסיס עוטף את הליט כל גופת תחילה, לאחר מכן מרים את הליט על הכתפיים, ומעביר כנפו שפת ימין על הכתף השמאלי, והנוהגים כן אינם צריכים לשום מנהגם, שיש להם על מה שיסמוכו, והנוהג כן, והשם מיד לאחר מכן לומר בפסוקים מה יקרא חסדך, ואינו צריך להמתין עד שיסיים העיטוב בתליט. So the first thing, and the Hakham Obadia Yosef is telling you, no, we don't necessarily only have the Ari. We have people that wear the talit a different way, like the way I showed you. Okay, that's fine. There are sources to rely upon that, and such people don't have to change their custom. It's 100% okay, and they can say the pesukim that they say when they do it. There's pesukim to say, when the talit is first on you before you finish all that as well. Again, they appear in the older sidurim. But now somebody who has the custom to follow the Ben Ish Hai and only wrap the head first, such a person should not say anything until he is basically done with the whole practice and drapes the talit down upon his body as well. But if he said he doesn't have to go back and make the Berakhah. Since he began the Missvat, and now such a person, he put the talit over his head only. He didn't finish wrapping his body, but then all of a sudden he heard Kaddish or Nakdishah or Berakhah. He's allowed to answer, even though he didn't finish his entire action of Atifah. Even if before the talit, what do you call them, the sissit would fall down over his entire body. Mark is running, looking to run. So let me just.
No, I'm not running.
Okay. That's why it's important to have books in front of you. It makes it easier. It really does. No, it's okay. And this I'm running through because really it doesn't apply to most of us, because we know the way we wear our talit and it's not necessarily in sync with the Ben Ish Hai. And to understand, an instructional video without a video, okay, and you have Ben Ish Hai telling you one thing and Hakham Obadia Yosef telling you something else, it's a little difficult. So for that reason, I'm not trying to spend too much extra time on it. וכתב עליו שלשאל יהודי לטלית גדול על כתפיו בזמן התפילה, אחר שנטלט בו בשעת ברכה וכיסה בו את ראשו. ומקום יכול לחזור הראש בטלית עד סוף התפילה, וגם בחורים שעדיין לא נשאו אישה, רשאי שנשאו את ראשם בטלית בעת תפילה ובפרט בטבעת הלחש. So it's interesting. Hakham Obadia Yosef is saying that it's permissible to lower the talit onto your shoulders while you're praying, once you finish the atifah, okay? But in any case, it's proper, okay, to cover your head with talit until the end of tefillah. Hakham Obadia Yosef is telling you it's proper to have your head covered with the talit during the entire prayer. And even bahurin, lads, okay, non-married young men, okay, they should also have their heads covered with the talit during the entire prayer. And at the very least, especially during the Amidah.
What's the reason?
I could go into Lehitatef Bessissit and tell you, give you exactly reason for it, but any idea why? Any idea why? So I remember hearing one time from I'm going to call it a yeshiva buff, that it helps them to not be not to be distracted. Yes.
I used to do it.
So I'll tell you honestly, I tried it once. It distracted me more.
You were used to it.
Obviously, I wasn't used to it. I said I tried it once. So I wanted to see what it was like. I didn't like it. I felt like, I had blinders, and you need to know what's going. Even though you're closing your eyes during the Amidah, at least you try to, and you try to stay focused on it. I felt like, like I wasn't part of the sibur anymore. I had like my own mehisa around me, and I wasn't part of the minyan. I felt really out of it, out of touch with praying the sibur. That was my take.
You to have two head coverings.
I don't hear anybody in the Zoom world commenting, so I guess everybody's okay. Well, there's nothing here in Halichot Olam about it, so I'm guessing Yalkut Yosef, whatever, but I'm not gonna look it up right now. Okay, if you want the reference point, I'll give it to you. Yalkut Yosef, Missvat Sissit, page 93, and page 96. Okay. No, we have Amudim. Missvat Sissit Amud Saddi Gimel or Kafhet, and Amud Saddi Vav or Kaftet. בגופך והנוהגים שאינם מתעטפים בטלית כלל ומשנים טלית כרוך על סברם בשעת תפילה וארבע כנפות בעמוד פניהם אינם יושאים ידי חובת המצווה והרי הם ברכים ברכה לבטלה. So this is something we also discussed in the past, that you have to do atifah, to make the Berakhah of Lehitatef, to wrap in the talit. And so he's telling you over here from the Yalkut Yosef that those who don't do atifah, they don't do wrapping whatsoever, and they just lower it onto their shoulders like a scarf, then they have not fulfilled the mizvah whatsoever, and they made Berakhah l'batala. But I also told you at the time that Nahar Misraim says that's the common way that people would wear the talit, like scarf-like. Because, as you said, I have no problem with that. Make the Berakhah, do the atifah, make sure you wrap properly, and after that, then wear it any way you want. As long as you made the Berakhah and you did the atifah afterwards, or immediately afterwards, you could move it onto your shoulders and wear it, a scarf-like, if you like. That's fine. Okay. Okay, that's it for that halakha. I don't hear you. Want to wrap it? Ha. We'll do one more halakha then. I got it. We'll do one more halakha. Halakha vav. Okay, I just want to see one thing over here. What?
installed. Company.
Okay, yeah, هو مخلصة. بين بتلت جادول وبين بتلت قطان يبارك بعمر. Whether you're wearing talit gadol or talit katan, look again, Maki. He tells you whether you're putting on talit gadol or you're putting on talit katan, yibarech me'amur. So again, he's telling you Berakhah on talit katan. Okay, we're not getting a straight answer from him. One time he said we don't make a Berakhah. Second time he implied you're making Berakhah, and over here he's definitely telling you making Berakhah on talit katan. Okay,
Yeah, in either case, the English translation.
right. Okay. ومن هاجنا بينها أري.
Maybe the first one because he said you slept. I wasn't sleeping. Because he was already wearing it.
Right.
Maybe in that case.
Right. And in the second case, you weren't sleeping with me because your wife was handing it to you.
Right.
So that being the case, then anytime you put it on, you have to make a Berakhah.
You make two berachot.
One is one Berakhah of Missvat Sissit and one is Berakhah of Lehitatef Bessissit. Because the Talit Katan, you're not being Lehitatef. You're only putting it on. Shegam Talit Katan, he tehillah me'atef borosho. Talit Katan, initially, you are doing Atifah, I was telling you. Me'atef borosho. Okay, so you're wrapping the head. Ve'harkach morid oto al gufo.
It's not like a wrapping garment.
No,
it's not.
at least what we have. There's a beginning, you wrap the head, and then you lower onto the body. And therefore you make Berakhah lehitatef onto the katan. And every person, if he does such a thing, great. How wonderful it would be. But for the person who does not wrap his head, but rather immediately takes it and lowers it onto his body and to wear it, Yibarech al Missvat Sissit velo Yibarech Lehitatef. You can't get clearer than that. I'm telling you, put it on, and you make the Berakhah of al Missvat Sissit. Let's continue. Let's see now. The first thing about standing. So you'll quote Yosef on that one. Umi sha'abar uberach ala taled b'yeshiva. Yasa. If you put on talit sitting, you made Berakhah and put it on sitting, Yasa, you fulfilled the obligation. ואף התעטף בסיסית בישיבה בדיעבד יעשה לפיכך חולה או זקן שקשה להם על העמוד. Let's say you have an ill person, okay, or an elderly person, people that can't get up easily. It's a difficult task for them, okay, or somebody's confined to a chair or to a bed. יכולים לברך ולהתעטף מיושב. They are allowed to do עטיפה Berakhah while sitting. לשעת الضحك כדיעבד דמי. Okay. Now, Yibarech al Missvat Sissit. וכתב הרב שמנהג רבים שלא לברך על טלית קטן כלל מכמה טעמים. So Hakham Obadia Yosef is saying that the minhag, okay, of most people is not to make Berakhah on talit katan whatsoever for a number of reasons. ומתכוונים לפוטרו בעת שמברכים להתעטף בסיסית על טלית גדול. And they have the intention to exempt themselves through the Berakhah that they are saying on talit gadol. ונהגו כן מחשש שמא אין בטלית קטן כשיעור לאחר שמתכבס בכיבוס. Because maybe the talit katan is not big enough, especially because it shrinks when you launder it, when you wash it. או שמא נקרעו החוטים בכיבוס. Because maybe the strings tore apart while you were washing it. Or maybe you don't make a Berakhah on a garment that you do not go out to the market with. Or they don't want to get, entangled into a battle of what a Berakhah would be on a talit katan, if there is a Berakhah on it or not. וכן אין רוצים להיכנס למחלוקת הפוסקים הליכה מביתו בית הכנסת הוויה הפסק. Or they don't want to get into the מחלוקת of the poskim if the walk that they take, the traveling that they do from their home to the kinis would be considered a hefsek when you're making a berakhah, or any other reason. ומכל מקום, מעיקר הדין רשאי לברך גם על צדיק קטן אם יש בו כשיעור המבואר להלן. In Parashat Noah, he will tell you the size of the Tzadik Katan, and if you have the proper size of the Tzadik Katan, and you still want to make a Berakhah on it, you can. Hakham Obadia Yosef is saying. Okay? And as long as you know that it's the right size and the sisiyot are not torn, they're not ripped. So we'll hold off over here for now. I want to read one more piece from Hakham Obadia Yosef. Lehitatef in Berakhah Tzadik Katan Beresheet Bessissit Yasei Halav and Tzaddik Lezo. If you made Berakhah Lehitatef on Tzadik Katan, also you fulfilled your mizvah, your obligation of Tzadik Katan. You don't have to go now and make another Berakhah on Missvat Sissit if you generally make a Berakhah on the Tzadik Katan. Yeah. So we're going to wait over here. We did 6 halachot tonight. We covered a lot of information. At the same time, we have to figure out how to make it move a little faster. But I know the first 2-3 parashiot are going to be very difficult to go through. And once we really get into more practical halachot related to the siddur and stuff, it's going to move a lot easier as well. And that's it for tonight.
Anyone get a comment?
I'd love to hear comments, but Bill DeRich's been quiet, Soli's been quiet, Michael Savely's been quiet, Nassim's been quiet, Nathan disappeared. But anybody, please throw out any comments. Anybody, somebody, wake up.
We're over. All right.
All righty, guys, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.